On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, I'm going to tell you why Deuce McBride remains one of the NBA's elite role players and why the Knicks' future success depends on recognizing him as such.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin Schall. I'm a credentialed media member that's been covering the New York Knicks for nearly a decade and the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. This is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving the most detailed insight on your favorite team for 10 to 11 months out of the year, at least 5 days a week. In August, probably more like 3 or 4 times a week, but we'll try to get to 5. So be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans and subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. On today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing the season that was for Deuce McBride. I'm going to do a deep dive on the lineup data that tells you why Deuce should be a starter and why he should play significant minutes for the New York Knicks. I'm going to do a statistical deep dive into his season using some really fun numbers from both Cleaning the Glass and B-Ball Index. We're going to do a full recap of his kind of up and down playoff performance, even though, as you'll hear, I kind of think his necessity on the court should not be totally contingent on how well he's shooting. And then we'll talk about if anything is actually going to change under Mike Brown or if it's going to be more of the same as it was under Tom Thibodeau. We start off with a review of his regular season. He played 64 games. He played 25 minutes per game, which is, it's worth noting, was a career high by 6 minutes per game. I don't know how much credit Tom Thibodeau deserves for that. I think a lot of that was a product of trading away Quentin Grimes halfway through last season and then trading away Dante DiVincenzo in the offseason, opening up a pretty significant role at the shooting guard spot for Deuce McBride. He averaged 9.5 points, 3 assists per game, 2.5 rebounds per game, and 1 steal per game. All of those were career highs. So congratulations to Deuce on a career season. He shot it a little bit worse than he did the previous season. 41% from the field, 37% from 3, 81% from the line, taking 5 threes per game in the playoffs. He played 18 total games. He was at 19 minutes a game, 6 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist. Did not shoot it very well. Shot it well in the Celtics series, abysmally against the Pistons, and pretty bad against the Indiana Pacers. He had 38, 37, 82 splits, taking just 3 threes per game. All right, let's talk about his position because I think this is important. 81% of his time this season was spent at shooting guard after spending the majority of his minutes, 60% of them, at point guard the previous season. Why is this important? Well, I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but I personally, I don't think Deuce McBride should really ever play point guard outside of under emergency circumstances. After showing some pretty good flashes as a creator, as a rookie, he just doesn't really have the requisite initiation skills to play point guard in the NBA, and it often takes him 10 to 15 seconds just to get into offense and get off the ball, which is a death sentence in the NBA. Like you just can't be that slow. Maybe that changes over time. He's already into his mid-20s. I think he kind of is who he is. And I don't think you have to pigeonhole him as a point guard because he is fantastic off the ball. And as we'll dive into with the lineup data, even though a lot of coaches would find it more palatable to play him at the 1, given his height, and find it tough to play him next to Jalen Brunson, given how small they are as a backcourt, it doesn't really seem to hurt the Knicks when he's at 2 guard. To that point, 2 straight years now, the Knicks have had elite production when he's played at shooting guard. In 2023-24, they were plus 12.5 when he was at the 2. In last season, they were plus 8.4 when he was at the 2. In 23-24, they were terrible when he played point guard. They were minus 9.1. Last season, they were plus 4.6 when he played the 1. So a little bit better, but still significantly better, if not the same gap that it was a year ago when he played the shooting guard versus point guard, because he's just not a shooting guard. He's just not a point guard. And the Knicks have far better options at point guard last year, whether that was Jalen Brunson or even Campaign is a far better point guard, if not a far better player than Deuce McBride. All right, so let's dive into some of the net rating numbers for Deuce McBride, because I think this is really where the money is made if you are arguing that he probably should have started last season. The Knicks were plus 8 when he was on the court. That is 4.6 points better than their overall net rating. So he made a substantial difference for the New York Knicks when he was on the court versus when he was off the court. That difference in net rating is 77th percentile overall. The offense got 1.5 points better. The defense allowed 3.5 less points per 100 possessions, including a big drop in opponents' effective field goal percentage, and forced turnovers were way up when he was on the court, which is predictable. Those stats are impressive. Where they get really impressive is when you look at the lineup data. So we cited the stat a lot last year. Shout out to my buddy XJ over the Hot Hand Theory for pointing it out initially. He was the only Knick to appear in all 5 of the team's best 5 regular season lineups. Interestingly enough, Cat and Mikal Bridges appeared in 4 of the 5. So take from that what you will. The best version of that lineup was him with the starters in place of Mikal Bridges. So Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns, which is interesting because we spent all season preaching about 5 out and how much Josh Hart's presence hurt the Knicks when he was on the court. Again, that's a small sample size, but that's suggestive that Deuce is such an impactful shooter. It can offset to some extent how Josh is guarded. And that gives that lineup sufficient shooting. And Josh insulates Deuce from a physicality perspective, from a rebounding perspective, as we're going to get into. Deuce is almost a uniquely bad rebounder for a combo guard, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Josh compensates for some of that. Josh brings some pace to the table that Deuce can certainly benefit from. So those two are actually pretty synergistic together. It makes a interesting case next season, which maybe we'll talk about because we haven't really discussed this as a lineup possibility. Politics aside, which maybe you can't put politics aside, but is there any possibility of the Knicks bringing Mikal Bridges off the bench as the 6th man and going with this starting lineup? Because that group had a plus 43.7 net rating. That was the second best 5-man unit in the entire NBA that played at least 100 possessions last season. So that is a ridiculous number. Deuce was also part of the 13th best lineup in all of basketball, which was Payne, Deuce, Mikal, OG, Cat. That one was plus 31.6. The 2 bench guards plus really any 2 of the 3 wings in Karl-Anthony Towns was a consistent formula for the Knicks last year. To me, it makes a lot of sense. You are emphasizing Cat, and you're allowing him to do what he does best in a really great way because he becomes the fulcrum of a spaced 5-out offense. Your whole goal is to get him the ball and to get him good shots. With Josh out there, you're pushing pace. With OG and Mikal, you're insulating him defensively. Deuce also helps with that. Is just really well spaced, really quick moving in a way you can't really get to when Jalen Brunson is at times dominating the basketball. So those units, even with Jordan Clarkson in Campaign's place, I am really interested to see how they perform a year from now. In the playoffs, and this I found really telling, where Deuce McBride shot worse and the competition is higher, his presence on the floor made an even bigger difference for the Knicks than it did in the regular season. The Knicks got a 7.5 point boost in net rating when he was on the floor. That was second on the team behind Karl-Anthony Towns. So that is really telling because, again, Deuce did not have a good shooting playoff, right? He had 38, 37, 82 splits, and yet the Knicks were dramatically better when he was on the floor. And the offense in particular, again, when he didn't shoot well, was over 6 points better per 100 possessions when he was in. A part of that was 9 of their 10 best lineups that played at least 10 possessions featured Deuce McBride. Again, that is an extraordinarily small sample size. Even like the regular season lineups, like those top 5 lineups I'm referencing with Deuce McBride, right? They were all between 100 and 200 possessions. These are all small sample size. So if somebody wanted to poke a hole in my argument, I think that is where you would lead. And my counterpoint to that, as it's been all season, is you might be absolutely right. I don't think you are, because I think the fact that he's guarded on the perimeter, and we'll give you the one stat that tells you that he's guarded on the perimeter, makes all the difference in terms of how the Knicks operate, particularly makes all the difference in how Karl-Anthony Towns is able to operate offensively and allows you to unlock an offense that is and should be, with the talent available, one of the best, not just in the NBA right now, but one of the best in NBA history. But if you don't believe that, why not test it? Why not give it a long runway and see if you have a super team just hiding within your regular team, and you don't know it because if you're Tom Thibodeau and you had all this wiggle room down the stretch in the regular season, you never deemed it necessary to test these lineups. And frankly, spoiler, getting ahead of myself, but we don't know if Mike Brown is ultimately going to be interested in testing these lineups, but I'm really fascinated to see if he is. The biggest key to the success the Knicks had when Deuce was on the floor was that he's always treated like a shooter, even in a relatively down shooting season. B-ball index is a great number. I'm so happy I subscribed to B-ball index. 92nd percentile in off-ball gravity in the entire NBA. Josh Hart, conversely, 57th percentile in off-ball gravity, which is actually a lot higher than I thought. And I think a testament to the fact that teams are incredibly fearful of Josh Hart crashing the offensive glass. And even when they don't treat him like a shooter, even when they put a big on him, you still have to hover somewhat close. So that is a really, really interesting number. But Deuce just made all the difference in the world, right? That's still almost a 40% jump in terms of gravity relative to the rest of the NBA. That is a very big deal. When we come back, I am going to do a deep dive on some of the other statistics that I think tell us everything we need to know about Miles McBride, what kind of talent he is, and where he struggled at times last year, because it wasn't, despite how much I love him, a perfect season for Deuce. So we're going to get into all that next here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our newest friends here at Locked On Knicks over at 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're seeking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I am not a golfer. I am a bad mini golfer, but to me, the most fun of mini golf, and what I assume would be the most fun part of golf for me, is the trash talk and getting into your friends' heads and forcing them to miss a putt that they have no business missing. You could rely on an alcoholic beverage for that. For me, the 5 Hour Energy Transfusions are the way to go. You want to be sharp. You want to be at the top of your game mentally, and I think 5 Hour Energy Transfusions can help you get there. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the Bev cart. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5energy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 13th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order Transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. All right, what's up, guys? We are back to finish up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast with a statistical deep dive into Deuce McBride's season. I went a little crazy with the stats on this one because I think Deuce is at times best viewed as a stat-driven play. Not that he is stat-driven. I think he's best understood by his stats, I guess would be the best way to phrase that. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if you prefer a different approach to these player previews. I just thought I found a lot of stuff that was really interesting, and I wanted to share with you guys. He was 78th percentile in B-Ball Index's LeBron statistic, which is one of the better all-in-one catch-alls out there. Relative to his contract, you got to imagine that is one of the better numbers in the league. Again, a reminder, Deuce McBride, 2 more years left on his contract for the New York Knicks, and he is making, I'm double-checking the number right now, $4.7 million this year, and then just $4.3 million in 2025, 2026 as what I would argue one of the better role players in the NBA. His efficiency was quite a bit down this season. Again, he was successful even when he wasn't shooting well, but it's still nice when he shoots the basketball well. Last season, he was at 1.17 points per shot. That was 71st percentile. This year, just 1.08 points per shot attempt. That was 41st percentile's effective field goal percentage, which just measures 2s and 3s, not free throws. 56.4%, 80th percentile season ago, down to 52%, which is just average 49th percentile. His assist percentage, this was encouraging, went up despite his usage going down 4%. His assist to usage ratio, in turn, went up dramatically. He went from 16th percentile in that statistic to 46th percentile in that statistic. So he's passing the ball quite a bit better. He was 71st percentile in assists per 75 possessions. Perhaps the most exciting stat is those assist numbers went up, which means he was throwing the ball around the court a little bit more, not just chucking. And he still led all combo guards with the lowest turnover percentage at 5.8%. That is a remarkable stat, giving cleaning the glass, I don't believe, has a minutes cutoff for that statistic. So that is pretty incredible that this was a guy who was a consistent every night role player on a contending team, playing real games that mattered immensely. And yet his turnover percentage was remarkably low. That is really exciting. Let's get into some of the shooting numbers. We mentioned his effective field goal percentage. One of the issues was his rim finishing. He went from 63% at the rim, 59th percentile, to just 52% at the rim, 16th percentile. So there are two ways to look at this. Deuce McBride very rarely shoots at the rim. It only composed 18% of his shot diet, which is 34th percentile amongst combo guards. And essentially over the 2 years, that drop off in percentage, because he only took he took 82 shots at the rim one year, he took 83 shots at the rim the next year. That essentially comes down to 9 total misses. So in that sense, it feels very fixable. But given that his volume is so low, he should have elite efficiency. Like you look at someone like Mikal Bridges, who also almost never shoots at the rim, but he's 71% at the rim. It's all off cuts. It's all in transition. And maybe for Deuce, like just because he doesn't get a lot of transition dunks and he's a little too small to be effective cutting to the basket and going backdoor with any kind of consistency, especially after losing Isaiah Hartenstein, who was really good at hitting those leading bounce passes, even though Cat can do a little bit of that as well. You would expect him to be more efficient. He had a F grade on like a classic like school F to A+ grading scale on B-ball index and overall finishing talent. So he's just a bad finisher, and I think that is something we have to accept about his game. He does occasionally flash incredible athleticism and throws down an awesome dunk around the rim. I would hope he is consistent, his aggressiveness and how he gets to the rim, but it's not like he can consistently rise up like that unless he has a really big runway. He was worse from floater range than he was a year ago, 38% down to 34%. Again, not a huge part of his game. A pretty big deal in terms of his efficiency, not totally falling off a cliff, was that he shot a lot better from long mid-range. For 23-24 to 24-25. He was 49% up from 41%. And what's telling is he did that nearly doubling the amount of shots. He went from 16 of 39 to 33 of 67. It became a big part of his shot diet. He was 82nd percentile. And that's interesting, right? Because the long mid-range for the last 15 years now, been considered the bad shot in basketball, right? And of course, we always talk about context being necessary. In the playoffs, at times, that's the only shot you can get to. But I think the concern with Deuce is that on the ball, that is the only shot he can really get to in the regular season. Because when he runs pick and roll, teams are going to either chase him over the top to run him off the 3-point line, or if the screen is run at the line and he's already coming downhill anyways, you'll see bigs take a drop approach and kind of dare him to shoot that long too, which I don't necessarily get, because obviously he's not that explosive going to the rim, and I think you'd want to dare him going to the rim, but that is still, it's kind of a force of habit, and part of that is that he's not really specifically scouted for that. Like, that is the good shot to give up. And last season he hit them, and he hit them on volume. It is a tall task to hit 49% of your long mid-range shots. So that is something to watch, because over a larger sample size, like let's just say I get my wish and he becomes a starter. Like, if people are poking at areas where that might not work and that might not sustain, I would want to see if he can consistently make those shots and live off those shots over the long haul, sort of like a late career Chris Paul, who does not have the explosiveness to get to the rim anymore, but is just so elite from that area that it doesn't really matter. And I don't know if Deuce is quite that level of shooter, but it's something to watch. From three, he was down from 41% to 38%, both from the corners and above the break. That's pretty interesting. And it just gives you an idea of just how thin the margins are to be like an elite 3-point shooter as a combo guard. Like, that 41% from above the break was 81st percentile the previous season. The 38% is only 63rd percentile. 38% from the corners was only 43rd percentile. So you are just, if that is your role in the NBA and you are a shooter, it has become such, you have to be just so incredibly good to play that role and play that role at a high level, because shooting is not only at a premium, but there is so much more shooting talent across the NBA than there ever has been. And in turn, the relative bar of success goes up. The good news for him from the corners is that it remained like a really big part of his shot diet. That is again, for a player like Deuce, that is always going to be his most efficient shot. It was 17% of his shots. That was 82nd percentile in the NBA. In the past, he'd gotten up even more. He was 100th percentile as a rookie, 98th percentile second year. His third season playing more minutes, he was 93rd percentile. To me, that seems like a direct impact of losing Julius Randle and not having an elite corner three creator anymore. I wonder if more minutes with the starters and Jalen Brunson get more of those shots. I wonder if Jordan Clarkson, who's better at driving and spraying than someone like Campaign, could get him more of those shots. I think that is something that will pretty clearly help his efficiency. When we come back, a few more numbers for you on Deuce McBride and maybe some quick thoughts on if anything will change under Mike Brown. We'll get into all that next here on Locked On Knicks. All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks to continue our discussion on Miles McBride. I talked a little bit about the three-point shooting. Ideally, the corner threes going up, I think, will be, and the quality corner threes, because he took a lot of really hard contested shots, and he was one of the better tightly contested three-point shooters in the NBA. He was 86th percentile in that stat per B-ball index. And that's a notable number because he had an F grade in three-point shot quality, which is an indictment on Tibbs and, again, the other Knicks' ability to create those shots. So, again, I think that is something playing off of Jordan Clarkson could change, playing more with the starters. He might get slightly higher quality shots, though, even though he's playing with better players, he'll also be defended by better defenders. So that is something to watch. I think because of his limitations off the dribble, though we'll talk about it in the playoffs, he showed more flashes of self-creation in terms of threes. And just because of his size, like it is hard for him to get really easy looks, right? Like at 6'1", he's not Michael Porter Jr., who can just rise up in a crowd and have a clean look at the basket. Like you have to really get him space for it to be a clean three-point shot. And we'll see if the Knicks are able to do that better next year. He graded out really well on ISOs per B-ball index, which I found fascinating. It's not something that he is really over-reliant on or really gets a lot of opportunity to do. But again, going back, looking at some of my notes from the playoffs, that was something that actually expanded a little bit as the season went on. He had some real flashes isolating in the playoffs that made you wonder, all right, is there something a little bit more here with Deuce McBride? He shot slightly worse from the line. Again, he barely takes free throws, so I don't know if that matters. He was 26th percentile on shooting fouls drawn. That he had 0 and 1s the entire season. Somewhat telling stat. Doesn't get to the rim. Doesn't shoot a lot of free throws. Unlike Mikal Bridges, he can compensate from that because Mikal would try to compensate with a lot of mid-range shots, and Deuce compensates by having 56% of his shot diet being three. All right, some of the highlight numbers defensively. He was 99th percentile in terms of screen navigation per B-ball index. Maybe the single best case for him starting and playing point of attack is that with Karl-Anthony Towns, if you are going to continue to play mostly a drop style of defense, and we have to see if that is Mike Brown's inclination. I have a feeling he's going to mix it up a little bit more, but I think drop will still be a heavy part of the diet. You need someone who can get around screens. And that was supposed to be Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges was terrible in that. And you just have this guy rotting away on the bench who is as good as anyone in the NBA navigating screens in Deuce McBride. He was 96th percentile as an off-ball chaser. And that is a important number when he is off the ball, obviously. It's in the name, off-ball chaser. But when he's playing with a Jalen Brunson or he's playing with a Jordan Clarkson and he's not playing, well, not that those guys would play point of attack. I'm saying this to say, like for whatever reason, maybe it's Mikal Bridges in the game. If you choose to play him off the ball, he can do that too. That's the best way of summing that up. 64th percentile in perimeter ISO defense, which I found interesting because I think at times I expect him to be this guy that goes out there and like, all right, shut down Dennis Schroeder, shut down TJ McConnell. And at times in the playoffs, he really struggled with those matchups. And I think it is due to, again, the fact that he is somewhat small and he is a good athlete. He is not like an Amen Thompson level athlete defensively. So he's not going to be like an elite isolation defender. Like he's not in the tier of like, if you want to go smaller guards, like someone like Davion Mitchell or Gary Payton II, right? He's not quite that, but he's good enough getting around screens and he's good enough off the ball that he still trends out as a good, if not absolutely elite defender, which is remarkable given his size limitations. He was 67th percentile on steal rates, shows flashes of being an elite pickpocket early in his career. It's kind of leveled out as merely a good one. Average foul rate, I mentioned this earlier, he's an awful defensive rebounder. 4 straight years, 6th percentile or below. Previous 2 years before this one, he was 1st or 2nd percentile in those stats. Took on really difficult matchups generally. Took on B+ level matchups according to B-Ball Index. So that is representative of the season he had defensively. I'll be quick on some of the playoff stuff with him. The Pistons series, he just shot horrifically. His 27, 26, 50 splits for him. Again, I think some of this, not to put it on Tom Thibodeau, obviously a lot of it's on Deuce, but inconsistent role, inconsistent minutes, hard to shoot the ball well. But you know what? You look at Landry Shamet, he had the same thing, and he was able to shoot well throughout the playoffs. And that is generally what an elite bench option is asked to do in the NBA, and Deuce at times struggled to do that. I mentioned he was not always great guarding Dennis Schroeder, and Dennis Schroeder really had his way with him at times in this series. But even in games where he didn't shoot the ball well, like I go back to those net rating numbers early in the series, like not early in the series, early in this podcast, they indicate that he still has a really positive impact. And you look at game 1, for example, like inside the final 30 seconds of the first half, like he just makes these extra effort plays that belie, or I guess underline, like why he still helps the team even when he's not shooting well. Like inside the final 30 seconds, first half, game 1, he stands up Dennis Schroeder, picks his pocket, dives on the ball, calls timeout, right? Like that wins you a possession. It's demoralizing for the other team. It's encouraging for your team. Like it's more than the sum of its parts. Game 4, him and Hart like hustle to save this rebound at the half court. They end up flipping it to Jalen Brunson, finds Cat in the corner for 3, momentum changing play, possession changing play, takes points off the board for the other team, adds points to your team. It's good stuff. Again, just strokes of ISO brilliance. There was this play, I can't remember who was guarding him. I wanted to say it was Malik Beasley because I wrote Jaden Ivey in my notes, who did not play in the series, so that was wrong. But he looked one way and then just did this rapid fire double between the legs, snatch back, strokes at 3, and you're like, all right, there's like a little more here, right? Like it's clear he's been working on a bag behind the scenes. He was very bad whenever he was asked to play point guard, or at least for the most part, just incredibly slow to initiate offense. He had a terrible game 6 against the Pistons, like really hurt the Knicks in their minutes in game 6. Like at one point, missed a wide open 3 that Hart spoon fed him, got the offensive rebound, Hart hit him again. He wasn't confident enough to shoot it. There was a pump and go drive where he just chucked the layup off the backboard, got it with the shot clock dwindling and like dribbled it out of bounds. I remember that being the low point in that game 6. And I remember sitting there thinking, all right, we might just be going to game 7. But I'll skip ahead to the Celtics series because he immediately bounced back. Clearly his best series of the playoffs, at least offensively, 8 points per game, 52% from the field, 50% from 3. He was absolutely essential in game 1 of that series. If you remember, 11 points in 19 minutes, 3 for 6 from 3. He was like the one Nick, unless I'm forgetting, I think maybe OG because he was so good in the second half. Who shot the ball really well in that game. Just crucial in a game that the Knicks won on the absolute thinnest of margins. In game 2, just flying around defensively caused a lot of chaos for Boston. Some of that hustle showed up in game 6, where if you remember, he had the LeBron block in transition on Derek White. And then after OG had the pickpocket, ran down the court with him. Only guy who chose to hustle on either team and ended up getting a putback because OG missed a dunk. And there were more flashes again of like just like really, really like borderline star level shot making. Had like a relocation 3 after he drove, sprayed it to McHale. Shot clock was dwindling. Drew was in his face, and he put an off the dribble 3 in Drew Holiday's eye. That was just like a oh my god type of moment. Late in the shot clock in the first quarter of game 6, had that rise up 3 where Derek White was in his jersey and just rose up and ripped one over him. In game 6 overall in that first half, you remember 17 minutes, 10 rebounds, 17 minutes, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 stocks, was him and Mitch. Like just obviously like everyone came out flying in game 6, which was just so clear cut the Knicks' best overall game of the season. He led the way in that one. And then against the Pacers, he helped key a 21-7 run to open the fourth quarter in game 1, to make it 111-119. Unfortunately, was pulled about 2 possessions after that. Had that block where he met Pascal Siakam at the Summit. hit a couple threes. Like he was a key. Oh, sorry, he drew a foul on a three. That was. I think he might have done that twice. I can't really remember. Maybe Cat did it the second time. But point is, he was essential. Tibbs takes him out. Knicks lose that game. Not 1-for-1, but ideally, you trust the guy and you keep him on the court. Showed great synergy with Mitchell Robinson defensively. Game 3, multiple catch and shoot threes off campaign drives. Those two had great chemistry all year. Game 5, had that ISO 3 on Tony Bradley late in the first quarter that helped the Knicks just stick around in a game that they needed to win and ultimately won. Played just 7 minutes in the first half of that game, and then Tom Thibodeau lost trust in him as the series went along. Played just 11 minutes in Game 6, which I think was a mistake. All right, we're pretty much out of time, so I'm not going to get totally into my big question about if anything will change under Mike Brown. I will just say, I think all these big questions, we're kind of trying to pose them and then save them for a few months for the player previews. I will note on that front that I have a lot of concern that he's going to get the Keon Ellis treatment under Mike Brown. We talked a lot about that when Mike Brown was hired. Keon Ellis' profile is extremely similar to Deuce McBride in that he's not a particularly flashy player, is clearly not a star player, doesn't really have that potential, and yet everything he does on the court is additive, helps your team wins, and all the numbers scream it. And Mike Brown kind of consistently chose to play the stars over him, to play the DeMar DeRozans, right? The Zach LaVines, not Zach LaVine, because he was traded for after Mike Brown was fired, but the DeMar DeRozans, the De'Aaron Foxes, Malik Monk, anyone but Keon Ellis, even though the stats said he was kind of their most important player. And Deuce profiles very similarly. And I was sort of hoping that they were going to bring in someone like James Borrego or someone like Jay Triano, who's sort of a visionary offensive mind that, again, with assistant coaches, it is hard to tell. It is hard to know unless you go through hours and hours of interviews, what their outlook is on offense in the world. I think those are two guys who understand the value of shooting, who understand the value of spacing, and I think are believers in modern analytics, even the simple ones, just like net rating, and do not get caught up in what I would say is basketball stereotypes. I don't know if Mike Brown will get caught up in that, or if he'll say, hey, this guy is clearly one of the most impactful players on the team. Let's start him and play him 30 minutes a game. I'm a little worried just based on who the Knicks missed out on in terms of their assistant coaches. I think if the Knicks had hired Taylor Jenkins, I would have no fears about Deuce McBride's role. But we'll see what Mike Brown goes with. A lot of the reporting so far suggested Mitchell Robinson or the same starting lineup as last year, which I think would be a horrific mistake. And I hope I've made the case to you guys today why it's so important, both defensively and offensively, for Deuce McBride to start. But until next time, when I'll be back with Alex, this has been Locked On Knicks. I'm Gavin Schall. We'll talk to you really soon.